Welcome. My name is Andrea Sampson. I'm the CEO and founder of Talk Boutique and the Thought Leader Academy. And this is Conversations with Thought Leaders. Today, I'm incredibly excited to be talking about the opportunities and risks of generative AI with my guest, Mark Patterson. Now, Mark, if you have not met Mark, you've missed out on something. Mark is probably one of the most thoughtful people I've ever met when it comes to the future of work. He is a leader at the intersection of technology, workforce development, and social innovation. He's the executive director at Magnet, which is leading the development of a unique platform that connects job seekers, employers, and educators. Mark championed groundbreaking approaches to solving the complex problems of the future of work. His forward-thinking approach has made him a sought-after thought leader on topics such as skills development, technology integration, labor market dynamics, and bringing a systems-based approach to evolving the world of work. In his role at Magnet, Mark continues to explore how emerging technologies can be harnessed to create meaningful change and empower individuals in a rapidly shifting economy. Mark, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, Andrea. It's great to be here. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too. Mark, you and I have known each other for a lot of years, and I have seen you doing some incredible work in that time. Working through building Magnet out and creating the platform that it has become for so many. But I think what I'm most interested in and what Magnet has done is it's really gone deep into the future of work, and it's helped many to understand what's possible. And you get access to this powerful platform in a way that so few do. So, as you think about where we're going, and I know that you do think about this a lot, what do you think work will look like 5 years from now? Is it going to look like where we are today, or do you think it's going to look a little different?
Yeah, that's a really big question, and it's interesting because we have had the opportunity to go across the country talking to people that are in transition, looking for work, people that are employers that are employing large groups of employees, to leaders of post-secondary institutions. And, this is a question on everybody's mind. How are some of the technological changes, a rapidly changing environment of technology that's emerging? How is it going to affect my career, my organization? And even society at large, right? There's a big change where we're seeing a spectrum of kind of emotions coming from people, both excited and a little bit uncertain. There may be parts of it of technology advancements that are exciting, and also parts that may be concerning. But I think it's really important to be having these conversations, to be, breaking it down and thinking about, I don't have a perfect crystal ball, obviously. I can't tell you where we're going to be
No.
in 5 years. But I do and can definitely say for sure that it is going to be different. And we see some of the things that are happening super, super quickly. And I think we talk about the title, the risks and potential opportunities. I think one of the most important things is kind of to take agency in yourself, and to be really engaged and be aware of what is happening, because I think that's going to be really important as things change around us.
The world of generative AI is exploding. A year ago, I think some of us were just beginning to understand that there was this thing called ChatGPT, and maybe it might write our emails for us. And, we both know that generative AI has been around for much longer than ChatGPT. But really what that did for us was it brought generative AI into the mainstream, and it gave access to it directly in a way that none of us had really had that direct access. And so when you look at this evolving technology, generative AI, not necessarily ChatGPT, because that is only one of so many now. But when we think about generative AI and how it's impacting the way we do our jobs, what do you think is the biggest risk that we have?
Yeah, so I exactly as you say, it really came into our consciousness around November of 2022 with the release of ChatGPT, and there have been many releases and different models that have come out publicly since then. It's been worked on for many years. If we want to talk generally AI, we could go back to the early 50s when the field of study was really coined, and it's important, I think, to note that we've all experienced AI, whether we know it or not necessarily generative AI, but certainly predictive AI, machine learning, etc. Even in the social media feeds on LinkedIn, what is, of all the posts, what posts are going to be interesting to you is an example of an application. So it's been part of our lives for a while. Generative AI certainly has popped on the scene, and yeah, everybody was like, "Wow, it can write a poem for me or an email," and it almost seemed like just something that was almost gimmicky, maybe is the right word. And people were still trying to figure out kind of what are the applications of that. So
Mhm.
absolutely, and I just want to your question again specifically, Andrea, was.
Well, it's just looking at what are the biggest risks do you think we have when we look at generative AI
Yeah.
moving into the future?
Yeah, so I mean, there are some basic risks, obviously. Understanding what generative AI, how it is different, like it's presented to us in all of the tools that we look at as if it was the same as Google, for example. We just see a search box and we see some searches, but understanding how the large language models work, that they can hallucinate, for example. If you're asking questions, it can make up answers, it
Oh,
can make
yeah.
up facts. Knowing how to prompt. So if you've heard the term prompt engineering, but knowing how to prompt can greatly reduce that. There's also inherent bias built into because of the nature of the training data, where the data has come from. If you think of all of the content ever created by humans, especially the digital content that's available through the internet, that's all been training data. So there are inherent biases, but again, understanding how to prompt properly. We also see some of the other risks. There's a whole new term, I don't know if you've heard it, but BYOAI. So bring your own AI to work. People are bringing their own AI to work, even in large kind of settings in large enterprise or large businesses. And there are risks when you're using the publicly available free models of what information, maybe in your place of employment, are you putting into those models? Is it something that should be put into? Because anything you put into it, you're basically making public. So there are risks from those perspectives, but I also like to point out the opposite risks. There's risks of not optimizing or risks of lost productivity if you're not
Mhm.
adopting the tools. There's risks of falling behind if you're not staying up on the technology. And I know, one of the things that I would point out, it's really, really important, I think, right now, that all of us are willing to experiment, to
Mhm.
embrace experimentation, to be willing to become like a novice over and over again in your life. And that to some people can be really discomforting. It can be something that makes us, nervous or uncertain. But we really need to create a mindset of embracing that, because staying up to date on these tools and staying up to date on how they're changing your field, your area of work, or how it could increase your productivity is really, really important. And not doing that, I think, is one of the biggest risks potentially.
Yeah, I think you touch on so much there, and there was so much richness. And I want to go back to one of the comments you made around, um, what we put into these large language models. And I think there's something really important here that probably people don't understand, because we are still in the early days of generative AI and the LLMs. which most people don't even really understand what that is, which is, these large language models that the AI is drawing upon in order for it to provide us with the answers that we want. But it's continuously building that language model, correct? Am I?
Well, it's what it's doing is, you've heard of, and to keep it pretty non-technical, but about around, you know, 5-10 years ago, we started to experiment. And actually, you may have seen in the news recently, Jeffrey Hinton, who just
Yeah.
won a Nobel Prize, was one of the pioneers in this area of creating neural networks. And
Yes.
so we started to develop ways where, you know, AI was starting to be trained similar to how the human brain works. And these neural networks started to develop. And then there became new technology developments allowed for massive expansion of those neural networks and ingesting all kinds of information. So just to keep it really simple, people tend to think of anything on your computer as software. So it's like, if this, then that. Like, we all took a little bit of basic coding back in school. But generative AI is not a software program. It's basically these neural networks where you're feeding massive amounts of data and information. Basically, and I'm not kidding, all of the digitized content that's ever been created that can be ingested, has been ingested in these models. And that's why you'll actually see a lot of potential law cases and so on. Did they have the right to use some of the data sets, etc.? That's going to be something that we'll hear a lot about over the next while. But these models need massive amounts of information, need more and more data, to the point that they're even using synthetic data. But it's not a software program. It's basically taking these neural networks, feeding tons of data and information into them, and then they're able to predict the next best word based on the question you ask. So that's why they're called generative. They're generating the next kind of response based on an analysis. So new models are becoming, it's really interesting. Many interesting breakthroughs that we could talk on another session, but that's basically just the main thing is to understand is it's not a software program in the traditional sense.
And so because of that, so as I'm using it, let's say, I mean, I use, and we all do, different programs, whether again be ChatGPT or one of the many other different GPTs that are out there. And what's interesting, and I think where I was going with this is, as I put data into that model, I'm not just using that data for me. I'm actually giving my data to the model. And I'm allowing it now to use my data in ways. As somebody asks something, you could, as an example, say, what would Andrea Sampson say in this case? If the model had my data to the degree that it needed to, in order to provide that answer, it would draw on the data that I've already put into it to create that answer. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, even this conversation is likely to be, the content of this conversation, all YouTube videos, all content has been ingested into kind of most of the models. So yeah, absolutely. I think anything that's digitized right now is being pulled into the models. It's just important to know that there is a difference between the open models that you're using, for example, maybe for free. So you could have a premium paid subscription, but you may also use a free model. And certainly anything that's free would probably have terms and conditions where they're using any information that's put into it. You can get into different tools, not to go deep down this, but that are protecting privacy and content that you're putting into them. But that just know that when you're using kind of any of the publicly available models, the free versions especially, any content that you put into them is absolutely being used as part of the future training data of the models.
And so, there's so many different generative AI tools out there. And I think if we think about the jobs that we're all doing, and whether you are coming into the workforce, brand new, or, like me, have been here for a few years, let's just say, how do we choose the tools that actually work for us? Like I said, we all hear about the big ones, but I do know that there are so many other ones, and each one has the ability to do things a little bit differently. And I know some, like as an example, some now have the ability for me to talk to it and have a conversation. And I think there's something really powerful. And others are more, more made for perhaps graphical interfaces. What's your advice to anyone who's listening around? How do you make some choices where you're supporting yourself in the job you have with generative AI tools that are going to expand your capabilities? How do you choose, and what do you know? What do you know that's best?
Yeah, so and this is one of the, I think, the big things that I go back to kind of what I was talking about before, just the mindset of being willing to experiment, test, evaluate new solutions. And it can become overwhelming, to be frank, Andrea, because there are so many tools
Yeah.
that are being released almost daily. And this is one of the things we hear when we're talking to, business owners, small business. I'm like, I just bought a 1-year subscription and now something better has come out, right? So it is changing so rapidly. And we talk a little bit about the jagged frontier of some of these generative AI models, where it's not even across different models or across different tools, the capability is not consistent. But the one thing I would say, I think the most important thing is get in, test it, try it, learn about it to understand where the potential risks are, like we talked about before, of hallucination, etc. Become an expert. Don't just play with it. Put some rigor around learning how to prompt
Mhm.
properly. Maybe take a course. There's lots of things
Yeah.
available. We will talk about one course that we are making freely available at the end. But spend some time on that. Don't just think it's just Google and I can just do it. Yes, you can, and you'll get answers, but you could make them better if you invest a bit of time and just experiment. I mean, there are so many tools. I'm literally constantly trying new tools. Certainly multiple tools weekly. I was going to say every day. I wouldn't say absolutely every day, but certainly I'm trying new tools, and you're going to find something that works for you, and you'll use it for a while. But also, don't, even if you find something, don't stop
Get stuck
trying
in.
kind of
Yeah.
the new tools, because things are advancing so quickly. And I think it's that mindset that we have to have at this point in time.
And the little I know about this, like I think there's kind of some key things that one needs to be aware of. The first is that what is the language model that it is connected to, right? So we talk about that, and that's key because if it's connected to a large enough or a more established language model, you're going to get better answers. Obviously, if it's a language model that's maybe not as established, it just won't be as complete. So number one is, what is the language model, I would think, but then also too, what is it known for? Because not all AI tools are as general as some of others. Like some are general purpose, where some are more niche and specific. And I think that's one of the, like, if you look forward in a year, do you see that we're starting to see some of these tools start to specialize, because it's a bit of the Wild West right now, let's face it.
Yeah, and I would actually say, so this is a really, really good point. So there are, like you said, Gemini and ChatGPT and Anthropic, Claude, and a lot of the other ones that you'll hear, the large language models, and they are, again, general purpose. Yes, they have all the information. That's where it becomes really important to set the context. So there's two pieces, and if you study prompting more, setting the context for the machine and then asking the question properly becomes really important,
Right.
especially in the really broad models. You're starting to see a lot of specialization. So those are the open broad models. Then you get into specialized models that are only pulling content from a curated set of verified or validated content in an area. Say, for example, you'll have legal tools that are only pulling from all of the legal decisions, jurisprudence, whatever a lawyer would pull from. It's not
Right.
pulling
Right.
from Reddit, right? For
Right.
example, for a
Right.
lawyer. So
Yeah.
you have a lot of specialization. You're going to see medical specialization is already happening, and even in your field. And what we're seeing as well is a lot of larger enterprise are moving really quickly. So they're, RBC is not just going to implement ChatGPT. It's going to be a specialized private large language model with security that might be tied to some of their internal data. And that's where the differentiation and competitive advantage comes from combining using internal data and maybe using some of the power of the large language models, but constraining it. And having even a private large language model that's custom for large enterprise can happen. So there's going to be a lot of verticalization, specialization. The tools will become more accurate in certain contexts. And that's where it becomes very important. But if you're using a general large language model that's not contextualized, it becomes really important for you to contextualize or set the framing for the machine to understand what you're asking it. So yeah, that's absolutely happening, rapidly as we speak. And we're going to see a lot of specialized tools develop over the next while.
You've talked a lot about the importance of prompting, and this question is maybe going to be twofold. One is when, just with what you've just said about the verticalization, right away, I immediately, as you start talking about the bank, you're like, oh gosh, do I now need to worry about my data at the bank being stolen by, whoever, whatever hacker, because, suddenly they're creating their own language model that is including not only my data, but everybody else's. So there's the worry around that of what is the security. And then secondly, the prompting piece around that, because it's like, how could I, can I use generative AI to get into private models, number one. And then number two, how do I use prompting to be, I know how I use it, and I have all kinds of little tricks that I use, but what are the ways in which people start to understand how to properly prompt, or what's an improper prompt? What does that look like?
Yeah, so just to take the first one, I think obviously, something, and just because I've used the RBC as a company, it's something they obviously take very seriously, even now with your data in any form. And it's why they have to make sure that they're implementing the systems properly with all of the security and so on. So there would be a large process of going in, and not only that, but also ensuring that there's no bias or harm. So you can see some of the legislation that's already come out from the government. It's really hard to legislate because it's moving so quickly. But one of the core foundational principles is do no harm, and never create an environment where one client, for example, could be discriminated inappropriately versus another. So like a lot of those kind of guidelines are all in place, and any of these large companies would take it very seriously in systems where they're implementing it, either for internal use or for the use with their clients, which we will see applications moving forward. So that's kind of on one side. I would say our data is already kind of there. It's already in databases and systems.
Right. So it's not the risk is not.
Yeah, this is something
it's not magnified because because suddenly we're going into AI. So it's the same risk that was always there.
Yeah. And I think the risk is more in, if you were looking at from a perspective of an enterprise and implementing this, is what if the AI hallucinates and gives the wrong answer? And there was a case of this in I think a chatbot with Air Canada recently, and they were held liable for the response of the AI. So like there's already some guidelines in place. But it's coming, and I think there are going to be challenges. There are going to be breaches, data breaches, so on. But I don't think it's something, we already have gone to a digital world. So that was the first part of your question, but I just I blanked a little bit on the second part. So.
The second part was really because where I was going there was, can I prompt it to go and steal data, like that. And I think you've answered that. Like, no, you can't, because these language models are they're gated, they're protected, they're and I think there's opportunity in that, so it's not just risk there, but there's opportunity because they're gated and because they are protected. What they can do is create, and it's what you said, they can create a better picture of the person. There's more opportunity for that model to know me better, which will allow for me to perhaps be considered for things that I wouldn't have been considered for in a world where none of that was true. But the second part of the question was really around prompting and how do you prompt? Like, this is, to me, I think it's the power of, and it's also the fear of many people working with AI for the first time, is that empty box. What do I put into it? And how do I use it in a way that gives me what I want?
Yeah, so I think and this is one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently and talking to some people, but we're all used to this kind of, I'll use the term Google paradigm, right? Where we see a box and even below it, there's a couple of little things, prompts maybe on, trending things that are happening on the internet, in the news, etc. And they're all very simple prompts. But when you see an interface for kind of generative AI tools, it's often set up kind of the same way. But what you really need to understand, especially again in the broad, open, large language models, is that you need to set the context within which you want the machine to give you an analysis. So, give you an example. If you were wanting to analyze corporate financial statements, you're going to upload a couple of company corporate reports that you're interested in investing in. You could literally say to it, so you're literally putting this in the box. You're saying, ChatGPT, you don't put that, but you're an expert, financial analyst. In fact, you could even say you're Warren Buffett or you're
Mhm.
Charlie Munger, or
Yeah, that is exactly what I was just
you
going
can
to get. Yeah.
literally give it a persona, a kind of because when you do that, for example, if you say Warren Buffett, it's going to say, and it will understand that, and it will actually understand how potentially Warren Buffett analyzed, or you could say, use this methodology in your analysis, etc. So you're setting the context or framing for the type of analysis you want. And that's what I mean when you say setting the context. And
Yeah.
then you're asking the question. So that becomes really important because it's not just Googling where you Google a question and it will respond to you with a million links, and we all only look at the first page of the links, and then you click on an article and you go to article. What this is doing, and what AI search, which is something that's a big trend right now, what AI search is doing is it's actually synthesizing. So it's not giving you a link to an article, it's synthesizing all of the articles. So you want to give it a context, a frame of reference, a way to act, a persona to take on, whatever that may be. That becomes really important when you're setting up the context of you're asking the question. So I recently was in Singapore, actually speaking at another conference on AI, and when I went to Singapore, I literally said, I'm traveling to Singapore for X number of days. You're an expert tour guide. I want you to set an agenda for me for 4 days of all the things I should see. I have meetings during this time, so I'm going to be blocked, but set an agenda and so on. So you could say it's a concierge or it's an expert tour guide,
Right.
but you're setting that context is what's really important. You're not just putting
Right.
it in a Google question,
And it's so,
which we're used to.
I was listening to Scott Galloway, a great podcaster on Pivot. We were talking about this earlier, and he was saying, Google is dead, right? He said search is dead because I don't use search anymore because search is dumb and generative AI is smart. And search just gives me a bunch of articles versus generative AI is providing me with depth and more data, and I can ask it questions and I can have a conversation with it. What do you think of that? Do you agree? Do you
You know
think
what?
search
There's
is dead?
so this is I use a tool called Perplexity all the time, which it's a form of AI search. It's actually free. There's an advanced version. You can even do 5 advanced searches. So you can go to Perplexity. You can Google Perplexity and then get to AI search. But the interesting thing is, just want to go back to, it's incredibly useful. And I would say I'm using Perplexity more than I'm using Google now, for sure. But you still have to be aware that it can hallucinate. And if you're
Right.
not asking the questions properly, it could give you,
Yeah.
it could literally make up answers. So this is the other thing I just wanted to get to is research has showed that people are using these generative AI tools in three ways. One, you have and I'm not going to use the exact same terms, but you have your people that just cut and paste, right? So they'll put in a question, they'll cut it out, they'll send in the answer. And you know what, that can be okay if you have like a low kind of risk. You just ask it to rewrite an email for you, you scan the email, there's nothing in that. But if you're writing a report for a client, or you're doing something that has to be accurate, you should never do that. You should actually be iterating with the machine. You need to be fact checking and verifying. And you cannot take, because it is generating, it can still hallucinate, especially the large kind of general models, and especially when they're not prompted properly. So this is why kind of working backwards, learn how to prompt properly and effectively. Understand this, what I was saying before, what we call the jagged edge of kind of capability, what's within its capability, what's maybe not. And to your point, it can depend on the large language model that's supporting the tool you're using. And verify, validate, and check, especially if it's really important. There have been some really public cases where people have obviously just used a tool, they've, for work or for something else, they've published it, there's factual errors in it. It's been a really big reputational issue for the organization or for the individual. So don't do that, but use it, because it can really save you time. It can create a framing. And I will say just one last thing, Andrea, on this, is that the lure of just cutting and pasting, it is like, there's like this siren song that it's just, it looks so good that I'm just going to, cut and paste. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, don't do it. I agree. And I think that, what my experience with AI has been is that it's a great thought partner. It helps me to think. I think you and I are similar in this, where, it's great to have input in that, as I'm thinking through something, I need more input, and Googling takes me down a real rabbit hole that I may not come back from. My ADD is going to keep me going. Whereas what ChatGPT does, or any of the AI tools that I use, is that it actually gives me exactly what I'm looking for, or something I disagree with, which is equally as important. And so it allows me to kind of think about that more.
Yeah. The other thing is it's easy to, for example, use it, because it can be very helpful, obviously, in writing and so on. But a lot of people I know are actually, using it as their antagonist. So they very purposely focus on developing their own writing skills or critical thinking skills, etc., like exercising that, using it. But then you can use it as an antagonist to what you've written, to say, is there anything I've missed, etc. So, and I think it's really important to kind of maintain our own agency and our own whatever on writing. Don't rely on the tool. It's helpful. It's a helpful tool, but it's not going to give you facts all the time.
Yeah. So. I just saw a comment come in that, that said to ally with it, not to rely upon it.
Exactly.
I agree more.
I think of it like an intern, right? If I was hiring a junior team member, somebody who's, passionate about being in my field, but not an expert, that typically I may have had to go away for a week, do some research. You're able to iterate a lot faster, but think of it as that's a helpful framing for me and how I think about it.
Yeah. So, Mark, you mentioned you've got a course that's free that might help people. So anyone who is sort of in those early days of AI, working or not really quite sure yet how to build those prompts or how to use this tool effectively, I think your course, because I know it's one of the great things that Magnet does, is it makes a lot of things available. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a work in progress, and I would say we built a website because we've been doing a lot of work with small businesses and individuals and not for profits. So we started curating some of the information that we're enjoying or finding useful. It's certainly, there's a massive amount of information, so we're not trying to be, the one-stop shop. But if you find something that you're interested in, you can certainly forward it to me, link with me on LinkedIn, etc. If you find something that's valuable to you, and we can share it and create a little bit of a community that's supporting other small businesses and other people in this kind of journey that we're all on together. I think that would be really helpful. You can find it at Magnet AI. Now, specifically the course, what we found is there's a lot of content. There's a lot of great content. Some of it's free, some of it's paid, and you may want to continue on. But we didn't see anything that was kind of 1 hour.
Right.
And
Right.
we were like, you know what, for a small business owner, for somebody who's really busy, the first step is just giving them the basics. Like, here's some really basic information. So the 1 hour course is really designed, it was kind of positioned for a small business owner or leader, that just to get the really kind of basics. It's certainly not going to give you everything, but it will get you started on some of just the core issues around what we've talked about today. What are some of the risks, some of the opportunities, and also how do I prompt the machine more effectively? So that's, I think, what's really important. And then you can go on to many other kind of learning resources that are available and so on. But we wanted to create that 1 hour version.
Great. That's, and I, having looked at it myself, it is powerful. Like regardless of whether you're already using AI, I think it's always helpful to have these resources to go to, because there are things that, we all get stuck in our own habits. So these little helpful 1 hour resources for, is so great that it's easily digested, and you'll find something in it. You absolutely will. And Mark,
Yeah.
I know that you've got a big event coming up in a couple of weeks. I know because I'm speaking at it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Magnet Network Live, and what was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, we're very excited. So as you mentioned, Andrea, Magnet is a center of innovation focused on the future work that's housed at Toronto Metropolitan University. And one of the things that we're very proud of at Magnet is kind of the network of collaborators that we have. So across Canada, there's so many organizations doing incredible work in their communities that are supporting people in the transitions that they go through, and supporting small business, and in thinking about these issues, and how do we make sure that we prepare and support each other, but prepare a society that's going to benefit from these technologies, stay productive. Canada, I'm sure you're hearing, has productivity issues, so that is a concern. But what we're doing is bringing together around 200-300 thought leaders from not only in Canada, but Europe and US, etc., to talk about some of these issues. So there'll be some discussions on technology, how AI is changing the future of work. We have an absolutely amazing keynote from Berkeley, who will be talking specifically on this. Absolutely incredible speaker. I've actually saw her at a conference in Stockholm. So really excited about that. But we have many speakers. Andrea, you're speaking. So I'm very excited just to bring people together that care about these issues, that care about the future work and how it's going to impact our society, and have those discussions, and to be able to learn from each other and take that home to our own community, and create kind of the strong network. It's what we do with technology, from building technology and supporting. And that's why we're calling it Magnet Network Live, because it really is kind of a live version of what we try to do from a technology perspective, which is bringing together all of the different actors in the system to help support Canadians in transition. So excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think what you're doing is so important and so necessary right now as we look out into the world, because it's never been more important that I think we come together as humans, as people, but also as business people. We don't see each other every day in the way that we used to, right? Our lives are, so many people are working from home and in hybrid situations. So these types of large gatherings are so important to connect us, to allow us to learn from each other, and to really get connected in with these global influencers who are doing work that is literally changing our future. And Mark, you are one of those influencers. And so I just want to say thank you for the work you are doing.
Well, I have to say, Andrea, you will remember where we first met was actually at Singularity University events, which, you know, were all incredible, and you were very involved in that. And so I would say, you know, full circle, you've had a big impact on the way that I think, and really even understanding the impacts of these exponential technologies and how, you know, things are changing so quickly, that we need these kind of systems, these peer groups, these sessions to inspire each other, to keep ourselves informed, and to build the kind of society that we want, with these technologies. And so, yeah, very excited to have you at our event. And you know, it is we're already at capacity on the event, but we do have a wait list for next year. So go to the website and
Sign
sign
up
up.
for next year.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and if
Yeah.
any spaces open up, there is a chance. But if any spaces do open up, we will be inviting people from the wait list. So please, if you're interested, check it out, and hopefully we'll see you there. If not this year, maybe next year.
Yeah, I'm excited, Mark, and I know that, you know, you remind me back of the days, the Singularity days, and I think about, you know, sitting around the campfire at Brickworks doing an Ask Me Anything with Salim Ismail
Yeah,
and Peter Diamandis, and that was such an incredible, incredible thing. And I think what you're creating is that same environment of the intimacy of being together, but with the brilliance of these incredible people you've brought together. So thank you. Well, Mark, we've gone a little bit over, so thank you so much for your patience on this. I just couldn't stop. We had so much to talk about. Thank you so much for sharing all of your brilliance and for being with us here today.
thanks for having me, Andrea. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure.
And thank you to everybody who joined us today. This was an absolute pleasure and so much fun. I hope you all took away lots. Go to Mark's course. Go and take. I'm telling you, you will learn something. You will take something new away, and make sure you're following Mark on LinkedIn and Magnet Network Live as well as Magnet. They're all great places for you to keep up with what is happening in the future of work, and more specifically generative AI and how it's going to impact not only our future, but how we work together. Thank you, everyone. Have an incredible rest of your day. I'll see you back here in a couple of weeks for another conversation with thought leaders.